Coogs House. The Houston Cougars know where they're going in March. They know where they're dancing, know who they'll be dancing with. But that might still not be the biggest news in Houston this weekend.
You are Locked On Cougs, your daily podcast on the Houston Cougars, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to Locked On Cougs, daily podcast about your Houston Cougars. I'm your host, Houston-born teacher and coach Parker Ainsworth, to break down all things Cougs. If you're a U of H fan or just a hater can stop by, please be sure to subscribe down below. We can latest on the Cougs in your newsfeed each and every day. We appreciate you making Locked On Cougs your first listen of the day. Welcome back to the YouTube channel. It's good to see you again. Remember, we're doing a giveaway at 1,000 subscribers. So A, make sure you hit subscribe down below to get us there. And B, to be entered to win the contest, you've got to be giving us thumbs ups and comments on the videos. If after talking about injuries and Memphis and the tournament and so on, you have nothing else to say, it's time to be dancing. So tell us what your favorite song to dance to is. Now, in today's episode, we're going to do a little bit on Marcus Sasser and the injury because there was some more developments in that. It looked like over the course of the day Sunday. We do have to talk some about the Memphis game in the second segment. And then in the third and final segment, we'll talk some about the bracket draw because we're going to continue to talk about that throughout the week. But first and foremost, I do want to send our condolences to the Samson family. It came out since our last recording of a full-length episode that Coach Kelvin Sampson and sister passed away on Friday. He was coaching with that on his heart and mind all weekend, obviously. It came out, I guess, shortly after the last episode was recorded. And frankly, obviously we want our condolences to Samson just on a very human level. And then B, the impressive feat in just getting up to coach in that kind of environment. I mean, he could have understandably just stepped back and stepped away. And then C, this, we talked about Kelvin, got to his sister, but his son and daughter also work within the program. And obviously Kellen is the lead assistant. And when it's a family business, family things like family trauma can impact the whole thing. And so we just want to send our thoughts and prayers to everyone in the Samson family for all the things that they're going through. Some things are bigger than basketball, and we appreciate, obviously, any time you guys need. Sounds like they may be doing some stuff on these early parts of the week that are off in the next couple weeks. Now, not that it's a lighter note, but we do need to talk a little bit about Marcus Sasser because when you and I last spoke on, I guess, after the Saturday game, it looked like he was going to be done. And then we kind of had a roller coaster of emotions over the course of the next 24 hours because he did, after leaving the court with a sudden, he at first collapsed on a crossover left to right. His body just buckled, hit the ground. The camera panned away, didn't really see much. We came back because it was following the ball, obviously. Came back, and he's on the ground in a lot of clear pain. The initial thought was, oh, God, not the knee, right? And then it wasn't the knee. He was grabbing the inside of his leg. It's clearly a groin. He went to the sideline at first. They massaged it up a little bit, and he went back to the locker room. This is all on Saturday. But I'll try to catch up if you weren't there, weren't paying attention. And then on Sunday, it felt kind of obvious when he didn't finish the game at all Saturday, and they didn't need him to, that he might miss more of the basketball games the rest of the way. And then on Sunday, he said he's going to warm up and try to give it a go. I got to admit, while I was excited to see him potentially playing against Memphis one more time, I was a little concerned. I would not have expected him to play. And I told you on Saturday, I imagine this is, he may sit all the way to the Sweet 16. He might come into the round of 32 game, depending on how he's feeling over the course of the week. And then to see him warming up, he looked like he warmed up fine. I'm sure there was some aches and pains that he would never let on to in the course of that. But it sounds like in hearing people talk afterwards, he was never really going to play. It was he would have had to feel really, really good to have had a chance to go out and play in this one. Obviously, Houston could have used him, right? Houston beat Memphis both times they had Sasser on the floor and lost them the one time that they didn't. I said I'd say that Kelvin Sampson after the game said, playing today, never really put high priority on that. We work all year to make the NCAA tournament. I don't think I could have lived with myself had he played today and got hurt. Also pointing out that there was no visual limp at him walking around, but coach also never really asked Sasser if he was going to would play today. Coach knew in the back of his head he wasn't going to play, and went to the sports medicine staff after the earliest part of the warm-ups and like, what do you think? And they said, no, like we'll keep warming up, but no need to go pushing any kind of full speed things. Marcus, for what it's worth, after the game said that he's got a little bit of pain here and there, pointing out that groins are tricky. But quote, I wanted to play it safe today, trying to play my cards right to be 100% for the tournament. Houston does play on Thursday night. We'll do more on the tournament later in this episode and obviously throughout the week. But they play Thursday night, which I guess like at the 9:20 tip-off is as late in the day Thursday as it could be. But you kind of wish we got a chance to play on Friday. Regardless, he was able to jog, warm up, and all those kinds of things to get ready for this one. He didn't do any full speed kind of down in a stance kind of slide drills or anything like that in the warm-ups that we saw on the floor. But he did go through the traditional, shooting warm-up, ball handling warm-ups that they asked their guys to do. And, obviously he's an elite athlete, but I don't think I noticed a whole lot of anything going on in the clips I saw of that. I do think it's interesting when you look at this. Obviously he missed the Memphis game. Precautionary in a lot of ways, right? But then, obviously, there has been a 16 seed upset, a 1 seed. But you wonder, do they need him to play in Thursday night's game against Northern Kentucky? Or can they get away without that? And if they can get away without that, then you're talking about getting to Saturday. That's a full week layoff. You're playing an Auburn or an Iowa team. We'll do more on the bracketology side of this later segment. But you start to wonder, how long will this really go? Because a groin thing can be tricky in that he'll feel fine one movement, and it just doesn't feel fine anymore. And I say this as an old man who hurts his extremities in all kinds of basketball games all the time now. That's part of getting old, folks. I do wonder, as an elite athlete, he was on the stim machine within 30 minutes of when he was on the bench on Saturday, getting massages and workouts and things like that put into it. I just wonder how long it'll take. I wonder if, not knowing how long it'll take, if Houston can manage to get themselves to Saturday without him, do they then start experimenting with the idea of like, well, can we get to the next weekend without him? Because suddenly they're looking like 2 weeks, and that would be obviously like even more beneficial. Their offense did look stagnant in the Memphis game without him. And for what it's worth, I have to say that I wonder who they can beat with that kind of offense at times. They went different stretches of the Memphis game without scoring, and Sasser's a big part of that. Sasser, frankly, his health is something they have to have. They want to make a real run to play NRG in Houston. But before we get into the Memphis game too terribly much, I do want to talk a little bit about Built Bar. Now, Built Bar is a fun sponsor of ours. It's one of my favorites because it's something I've been using for a long, long time now for my own breakfast each and every morning. But it's March, and the Built March Madness bracket is here. We know you have a favorite bar or puff, and now it's your time to make it count. Go to BuiltMarchMadness.com to vote for your favorites. I'll be voting for the coconut almond bar I'm always talking about, obviously. And you probably want the Houston Cougars to win, and you'll be voting for that bar or whatever bar you associate with Cougars and Cougardom. Some of them in red packaging. I don't know. And when you vote for your favorite bar or puff, you'll be entered to win a drawing where 50 lucky Locked On listeners will get a free box of Built Bars. Not only that, but one Locked On fan will receive a 12-month subscription to Built to have Built Bars or puff delivered monthly straight to your door. You got to try Built. Built is the best protein bar ever. Seriously, they're so amazing. You won't think they're good for you. What makes Built Bars and puffs so good? Well, for starters, they are high in protein, low in sugar, and covered in 100% real chocolate. That's right, real chocolate. Run to BuiltMarchMadness.com right now to vote for your favorite bar or puff and pick up a box while you're there. You can vote every day in March, so hop in and support your pick. Thank you so much to our fans, and make sure that you go to BuiltMarchMadness.com to grab yourself a box and vote for those almond coconuts. All right, so I said I want to talk a little about the Memphis game. I lied. I don't want to talk about the Memphis game, but we've got to. The Memphis game was horribly ugly, and frankly, some of the Twitter conversations, like, I got frustrated at one point, and I ended up taking the tweet down because I actually got some stuff backwards because I was like going back and forth about it. Houston loses 75-65. Should get that up front out the way. And frankly, they were down 15 at half. And so as poorly as they played in this game, they actually won the second half. They cut the lead to 5 at one point in that second half. I felt like they might make a run there at the stretch, even without Marcus Sasser. But I think the obvious thing here was in the first half, they got just utterly blitzed. They did not look like they knew what they were doing on either end of the floor. And they never had a guy the way Marcus Sasser was like, hey, we got to calm down. I got to go make a basket right now. They never had that guy on the floor. And that was painfully obvious, obviously, throughout the course of the basketball game. Jamal Shead kind of took up that role in the second half. But in the first half, they didn't have it. Jamal Shead was still trying to also orchestrate freshman Terence Arsenal or freshman Emanuel Sharp around the floor in a lot of ways. And kind of that took away from him being able to do some of those things like get a bucket when they need it. I still say that Jamal Shead is a running back and we need to run HB dive a lot. That's my favorite offense with him. One thing I thought was interesting that I drew up here, and if y'all like these segments, let me know. And if not, I'll probably scrap them. But I like drawing stuff up because I am a coach. And so they ran this version of a double drag a lot where they had Jamal Shead coming off of the double screen from both Jarace and Juwan or Reggie. And then they would drop Tremont to the corner and they would lift Terrance or whoever the backside guy was. And what you end up getting is a way to get a triangle inside to Juwan, theoretically, or you can swing it because the benefit of having Jarace here is he can be a pop guy as well off of the double drag. It worked out well in a number of different instances. And frankly, what I liked is it got Juwan going downhill in a way too for rebounding purposes. And that proved to be really, really big along the way in this comeback. Juwan Roberts set a record that just got set the other day. If you remember, Osar from East Carolina set the record for 19 rebounds for the most rebounds in the American Athletic Conference tournament game. And then Juwan Roberts on Sunday broke said record with 20. He had 10 offensive and 10 defensive rebounds. Now, admittedly, he had 10 defensive rebounds. Those 10 offensive rebounds were because Houston couldn't buy a bucket. They shot 31.3% from the field, 24% from three, and 67.9% from the free throw line. Across the whole, I'm not even sure I'm upset about the shots they were generating. They got some open looks. They had open threes. And I don't mean to bag on a freshman, but Terence Arsenal did have an open three when the lead was just 5 to cut it to 2, right? Like they had moments and they had shots. They generated the right kind of looks. The process was fine. The product was not. They just couldn't make the shots down the stretch. And frankly, it might have been kind of a wake-up call for this team they haven't had since the Temple game, which went similarly from a shot-making perspective. They've had other games that they haven't made shots in since. I don't mean to say that they haven't, but in those games, they're able to find a way to win, or like on Friday, Marcus Sasser comes in to save the day. Marcus Sasser's on the sideline in his warm-ups, and they don't have that, and suddenly this team realized, we are fallible once again, right? They have things to refocus on, things to dial into. Now, that doesn't mean that they're, like I said, Juwan Roberts did have a literal record-setting rebounding day. I don't mean to say that there were no positives to work from here. And frankly, I'd argue that Houston only won the second half by 5 points as far as the score goes, but it was very clear in that game, if watching the game in the second half, that it felt more like Houston ran out of time, right? They ended up fouling and getting the free throw game and going back and forth a little bit. But Houston ran out of time because they were continuing to chip away. And if they just started the game like they did start out the gates of halftime, they might have had a better chance. As I look at this Memphis game, I've talked a lot about the Cougs, and I get that. I should probably also give Houstonian Kendrick Davis its flowers. As much as this is not a Memphis show, and I'm not going to talk a whole lot about Memphis, he did have 31. At one point in the first half, he was keeping pace with Houston scoring on his own. He had a stretch in the first half where he had like a tough and one. The next possession, he had 3, and then they stole the inbounds pass. He had another 3. And that felt like daggers at the time. Houston would come back and not necessarily make it daggers at that point, but it was tough. It wasn't quite GG's at that point, but it was tough. I'd like to play Memphis a fourth time, but I also don't want to play Memphis a fourth time. Houston, I guess, kind of was already up 2-0 in the series this season. I wish they'd gotten a trophy at the end of one of those games, right? But that's the way that one goes. I think we have a consensus feeling that Marcus Sasser not playing was more than a 10-point difference, but I digress. Other things I thought were interesting in this game, qualitatively, not quantitatively, obviously. Terence Arsenal gets the start for Sasser, which I thought was interesting because for most of the season, Emanuel Sharp actually got that first guard off the bench nod. And in this game, Terrance Arsenal got the start. And I don't know if that was to keep Emanuel in the same kind of role, kind of keep his thing the same. I've really appreciated the growth in Terrance over the course of the last couple games. I think he's grown as quite a defender, and I wonder if that was part of the thing. Is like, hey, we'll get some length and defense on the floor, and we'll figure out the offense afterwards. Not that either went well in the first half, but it was good to see Terrance make the first shot out the gates. He had a corner three to open up the game. He didn't have a whole lot more baskets. Arsenal finished with 9 points on three made he had 9 points on three made field goals and then a pair of free throws. I'm getting my numbers here crosswords because I have bad handwriting. But I think it's when you look at it, like Terrance, I assume, has come back for his sophomore year. I guess some people do have a second-round draft rate on him because of potential. That's how these things go. But another year of playing under Samson under his belt, I think will turn like some of the intangible things this kid has on the defense side of the ball, going after the rebounds and hit ways poking at the ball and the passing lanes and that kind of stuff. I think it's really, really tremendous. And I think it kind of gets overlooked because like he doesn't quite get the steal, right? He didn't have any steals or blocks in the game on Sunday, but he's always actively disrupting things in a way that I'm really fond of on the defense side of the ball. And I'm really, really proud of the growth he's had because he was not that dude in November. And that just like the system, the culture, etc., building. On the flip side of that, Emanuel Sharp, I would have said a week ago, was the exact same kind of thing. Was turning into the same kind of, bulldoggy kind of defender. And he got exposed a little bit on Sunday. Bluntly, Kendrick Davis literally put him on his butt one time. And like Emanuel is a freshman, Kendrick Davis is a veteran senior, been around college basketball, right? TCU, SMU, and now Memphis. So like there's some of that'll happen too. I mean, Memphis has a guy that's 26 years old. Our freshmen were 11 when that guy finished high school, right? Like they've got a bunch of veteran guys on that team. But all of that said, Emanuel did get, kind of like humbled a little bit, I think, in the game defensively on Sunday. Reggie Chaney had just 12 minutes, and with foul trouble for Jarace, and Jarace would eventually foul out, I would have thought you'd see more Chaney minutes, and we didn't. Again, I'm not coaching the team. I think that's an interesting move. Admittedly, though, when the struggles are offense, Chaney is not a strong offensive basketball player, so he's not going to step in and help you out a whole lot there. They tended to go small with multiple guards around Roberts when they took Walker out of the game, and that only exacerbated problems on their own defensive end because Memphis is tall and long, right? And so those kinds of things, that's the way those kinds of things happen. Samson in the post game was quick to point out that he thinks it's a good thing that learning happened in this game without Sasser. He said, obviously, you always coach to win, you're always playing to win. But on the whole, he was quick to point out like the benefits of playing this game at this point in the season. And I have to say, like, while I wanted a trophy at the end of this one, I do understand what he's saying there. I do think there's some validity to that. You're not obviously like ever planning to lose a game, but you'd kind of rather lose on Sunday, March 12th than any time after that. And anyway, I get what he's saying there. I do think he's correct in that because like Jamal Shead had to take over the game in the second half in a different way. Terrance and Emanuel, both for all the faults we just talked about, like they did have to play in a big role. Jarace, I think down the stretch was finally starting to take command a little bit more in a way he didn't in the first half. And then he's just fouled out and didn't get to finish the job there. Jarace, for what it's worth, did play tremendous defense. Shot 2 of 6 from 3. Just 3 rebounds. I thought he'd had more if I'd like watched the game on the stat book, but he had 3 blocks, 2 steals, all over the game defensively in a way that I think gets undersold. Anyway, he started trying to be the lead guy on offense a little bit more in the last few minutes. I wish he'd gone to that earlier. However, maybe it was good to see that little like light pops on, like, oh, I can just go, right? Jamal Shead can run HB dive. I can run HB dive, right? Now, all that said, Houston left the Memphis game and about 20 minutes later found out that they were a number 1 seed in the NCAA tournament. And I'd like to talk to you some about how that looks, what that looks like, and give a little preview of the preview, if you will, for how the tournament will go for the Cougs, because they got a lot of basketball left to play, hopefully. But first, let's talk some about our buddies at FanDuel. Now, FanDuel is the number 1 sportsbook in America and is the midway point in the NBA season, and it's the perfect time to download FanDuel. because new customers get a no-sweat first bet up to $1,000 in bonus bets. That's bonus bets back if your first bet doesn't win. Just download the FanDuel Sportsbook app. It's safe, secure, and super easy to use. Then you can bet on everything from the money line to point scores to three drained. I'm actually going to tell you to go look at the Northern Kentucky-Houston game because they already got the line up. They want me to tell you about NBA games here, but we both know what the Rockets are doing. Bet that they lose. Now you go to the Houston and North Kentucky game. They got a spread set at 19.5 points. That seems fair. I think I'm going to take the over here, and I think I'm going to take the over here because Houston has some time off with it being the late game on Thursday. And if I'm being honest, I think this is not a team that takes well to being embarrassed on television. You saw Houston respond after East Carolina, right, and come back on Saturday and beat the brakes off of Cincinnati. This is a team that when you saw them lose to Alabama, came out and beat North Carolina A&T by 30 points, right? This is a team that once they lost to Temple, came out and beat Central Florida over the weekend by 11 points after having played them to just 6 the week before. Like, they typically respond pretty well after these embarrassing games on television. And Temple game, I guess probably the better thing would be to point out they lost 56-55, and then the next time they won 81-65, right? Like, they just don't like getting embarrassed on TV, and so Northern Kentucky might bear the brunt of that, and the 19.5 points might be too little. I definitely think I'm taking over 121, though, because I'm thinking this is like an 80-50 kind of game. And I'm telling you to do all of those picks and make all those picks if you want to follow my lead at FanDuel. FanDuel even lets you combine your bets for a chance at a bigger payout with the same game parlay. So don't miss the chance to get your no sweat first bet up to $1,000 in bonus bets when you go to FanDuel.com/lockedon. That's FanDuel.com/lockedon to learn more. Make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sports betting partner of the NBA. All right, so I said I want to talk some about the tournament, and admittedly, this is a preview of a preview because we'll talk about the tournament throughout the week. Thursday, we'll drop a preview of the game itself because that's Thursday night, so we got all day to preview it. Friday, we'll be back with a reaction. We may do a full bracket, like Midwest region breakdown on Wednesday. We've got stuff to talk about with the tournament. I'm not saying that like this is the only 10 minutes we're going to talk about it. You and I know each other. We're going to talk basketball a lot because that's what Houston's really, really good at. But I do think it's interesting. And Coach Sampson had the quote of the day in the aftermath of the Memphis game when he asked who the 8-9 seed was. And someone said it was Iowa-Auburn. And he goes, Auburn gets to play in Birmingham? Maybe we should have been a 9 seed. This is a pretty difficult draw. I think it's getting kind of undersold because some of the net ranking kind of stuff isn't necessarily going to go Houston's way. But I did think it was interesting, too, that in the same breath, Coach Quickliff hit around. It's like, the other day I was just randomly watching TV, and he watched Northern Kentucky beat Cleveland State, and he thinks Northern Kentucky is good and point out very quickly, like, they beat Cincinnati by 13 at the start of the year. Like, he just, on recall, had all that, and like, I'm doing research, and he just pulls that kind of stuff up. Northern Kentucky is a recent Division I bump. They have not always been a Division I basketball program, so I feel like I've never heard of them. That might be why. As far as like their KenPom rankings go, they're kind of somewhere in the same region as like South Florida. They don't quite have the same makeup from a roster perspective. They don't work through a 7'1", 285 kind of guy like South Florida does. I might be overselling his size a little bit. They operate a lot more with a 6'2" guard named Marquise Warwick. We'll talk more about him throughout the week, but that's kind of the guy's name to start looking up on Northern Kentucky. They play an extremely slow pace, and they play that slow pace, and I think Houston deceptively also plays at a slow pace. People might not realize that, but Northern Kentucky tries to keep the game really, really slow. I guess the tempo reading I'd look at that is they're playing about 62 possessions a game. The national average is about 67 possessions per game. Houston plays closer to 64, 65 possessions per game. So Houston's closer to average, but not quite as slow as Northern Kentucky. And those couple possessions do actually add up to a lot. The big thing is that Northern Kentucky will work a lot of clock to get into their offense. They're typically shooting, I should say, in like 19 seconds in the shot clock. So it's like 10 seconds left. Defensively, Houston works people down pretty far in the shot clock or gets a turnover pretty early in the shot clock. And so interesting how that pays off. that is the interesting thing there is that that you'd think that would lead to a team that also values defense really highly. Northern Kentucky has kind of had an up and down season with that. And I think the difference maker here will be like, can we get that same Juwan Roberts impact on the boards? I think Houston should dominate the glass in this game. Just from a analytical perspective, Northern Kentucky is 333rd in opponent offense rebound percentage. That means there's only about 30 teams worse in all of the Division I college basketball at keeping other teams off of the offensive glass. And you know what Houston preaches all of their guys to do, right? Like this could be the kind of thing that's over early. And frankly, one of the reasons I don't know that they need Sasser in this game is because the advantages are actually in a lot of other spots in this one. As far as other miscellaneous stats go, Northern Kentucky is not a tremendous three-point shooting team. Not one that's going to like knock your socks off. They're like top 110 on KenPom and three-point percentage and that kind of stuff. So like they'll make some, but they're not going to like kill you. I guess that should point out that with 365 teams, that's like top half, right? I'm not like worried about this one. I think the bigger thing will be getting out of it, getting safe, being healthy, and moving on. If Houston shows up ready to play, this one should be over early. We've seen Houston not have the best starts and those kinds of things. And for what it's worth, like Northern Kentucky, the University of Northern Kentucky is like a little bit closer to Birmingham, Alabama than the city of Houston is. But I'm going to be paying a lot of attention once I feel comfortable in this one at like what's going on in the other side of the of our part of the Birmingham region, right? What's going on with Iowa and Auburn? Because while it could be a close competitive game, kind of wears the winner out, Auburn getting to play a not quite, but kind of home game in the round of 32 as a 9 seed is a lot. And so we'll worry about that when we get there. Let's take care of business first. I thought Jamal Shedd was quick to point out in the post game of the Memphis game. And, again, they kind of bleed in together with when Houston got their seeding that you can't take any team for granted in this thing. Sasser said, you have to play every game like it's your last because it might be, right? Like, they're not taking it for granted. I don't want to either. I will say that we'll spend some time this week looking at the region as a whole because I think it's the Midwest region, an interesting region put together. So to Tuesday's episode, we're balancing a couple things. We'll see what Tuesday looks like. But on Wednesday's episode, we're going to look at the entire bracket, the entire Midwest region. Thursday, we'll preview Northern Kentucky. Friday, we'll react to whatever happened and hopefully continue on some basketball over the course of the weekend as well. But for all of those kinds of things, you can find me at Painsworth512. That's PAINSWRTH512 on Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, all your social media handles. I'll be happy to talk all things Houston Cougars. Basketball going on right now. We got to get some spring football talk in there as well. Baseball started up, and there's kind of been a roller coaster of baseball season already. All things Cougs. We have to talk Rockets, Astros, Texans, whatever. So make sure you find me on Twitter and Instagram and all your social media handles at Painsworth512. Thank you all so much for tuning in to Locked On Cougs today. Locked On Cougs is a proud member of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team, in our case, number one team in the country every day. Oh, I'm supposed to shout out somebody. Go listen to Locked On today. They talked to me a little bit about the Houston Cougars on that one. And go check out Locked On College Basketball because Andy and Isaac are working their butt off with a daily college basketball show doing everything during March Madness. So go check out both those. Again, Locked On Cougs, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team, our case, number one team in the country every day. Go Cougs.